school meals will also lift around 550,000 children out of poverty.
Williams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Child poverty rates remain far too high in my constituency of Stoke-on-Trent North and Kidsgrove. Can the Chancellor please outline what assessment she has made about how the fair decisions taken in the budget will address poverty amongst low-income working families in my constituency and across the country?
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And the honourable gentleman might know that around 4,000 children in his own constituency of Stoke-on-Trent North will benefit from the removal of the two-child benefit. That means 4,000 more children being able to go to bed in a house that is not cold and damp, and waking up in the morning and being able to have a breakfast, and the parents being able to afford things that currently they can't. This government is also providing funding for free school meals in England, delivering free breakfast clubs in every state-funded primary school in England, and also extending the Warm Homes discount to 3 million more children. I'm proud to be the Chancellor that has led this, to the largest expected reduction in child poverty over a Parliament since records began.
Esther McVeigh.
Mr Speaker, the biggest issue for those on low incomes is losing their jobs. Does the Chancellor believe there is any link at all between her increase in employers' national insurance contributions, her job tax, and employment levels slumping to a 14-year low?
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, the number of jobs has increased by 329,000 this year. That is the record of this government getting people back into work, and also through the Youth Guarantee, dealing with the fact that when we took office last year, 1 in 8 young people were not education, employment or training. That is your record. This government are addressing it.
Thomas.
Mr Speaker. I commend the steps that my right honourable friend took to support those on low incomes in the budget and through the financial inclusion strategy that was recently published as well. But can I encourage her to go further on the issue of savings, given that a quarter of people in the UK have little by way of savings, and indeed 1 in 7 have no savings at all? So will she encourage employers to work with local credit unions to help those who want to save automatically to save even a small amounts from their pay packets to do so?
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Through the financial inclusion strategy led by my honourable friend, the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, we are extending help to save within the universal credit system, and also working with banks and building societies. And I know that as a Labour and cooperative MP, my honourable friend works closely with the co-op movement and building societies to ensure that more people from low-income backgrounds can save for the future.
Samuel Wilson.
Mr Speaker, low-income families have been hit by being dragged into tax bands which they weren't in before, facing energy costs, and now the Chief Executive Aldi has said that unless the Chancellor reviews her raid on farm inheritance tax, that there's going to be rising food prices hitting low-income families as well. If she doesn't listen to the farmers, will she at least show some concern for consumers and look again at this tax?
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, if you look at what's happened since the budget, the co-op has cut or frozen the prices on 2,700 essential products at a cost of £1 billion, recognising the impact that the cost of living still poses to families, but also reflecting the budget package which supports our high streets, including our supermarkets.
Stephen Gethings.
2, please, Mr Speaker.
Who's doing 2, folks? Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The OBR have estimated that productivity will be 4% lower than it would have been had the UK not withdrawn from the EU. But alongside trade deals struck with the US, India, the government is also resetting our relationship with the EU to get better deals, for example, on food and farming, and also on electricity trading. But the honourable member's party talks about how leaving the European European Union has been costly and disruptive, but somehow thinks that Scotland leaving the UK and its internal market would be magically effortless and cost-free. I must say that the SNP are no better than those who promised the public an extra £350 million a week for the NHS. It's all talk, but no delivery.
Stephen Gethins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, I'm going to try and strike a more a note that's maybe a little bit better in terms of when we worked together with the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and others to ensure that we overcame Tory secrecy with their analysis of what it would be like to be outside the single market and the customs union. We worked together on that. So if we could overcome Tory secrecy on analysis about what it's like to leave the EU, with it now costing an estimated £250 million a day, when will the Labour Party release their analysis?
Chancellor.
Well, the Office of Budget Responsibility produced their independent analysis. They have confirmed that they believe that that 4% number is the correct number, and it's the one that they continue to maintain in their forecasts.
Bottle Crichton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Chancellor if the Treasury's made any assessment of the SNP's plans to separate Scotland from its main market, the rest of the UK, which is 60% of its trade? And while I'm at it, can I thank the Chancellor for £820 million extra to the Scottish budget?
Order. Sorry. The good news for the Chancellor is she's no responsibility for the SNP. Right, let us move on to Daisy Cooper, Liberal Democrat spokesman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The botched Brexit deal has wrapped up British businesses in red tape and has blown a hole in the public finances to the tune of £90 billion a year. The Chancellor insists that her #1 mission remains to get economic growth. So if that is the case, could I ask the Chancellor whether she and her ministers will be voting with the Liberal Democrats this afternoon to make sure that we can get rid of that red tape and deliver on a new UK-EU customs union?
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since we came into office last year, we've reset our relationship with the EU, which is why last May we agreed with the EU an expansive set of changes to our relationship, including on food and farming, on electricity and energy trading, and also on youth mobility and Erasmus. And we're taking all of that forward. But at the same time, we're also taking opportunities to trade more with fast-growing economies around the world, including India, and also by getting the first and the best trade deal that anybody has secured with the US. That's how we are going for growth, alongside the planning and infrastructure bill that we passed last night in this place.
John Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 3.
Minister.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to answer this question together with question number 18. The Chancellor was clear at the budget that we are taking the fair and necessary decisions on tax to do all we can to ensure that the contribution of working people is kept as low as possible. We've reduced the gap between taxes on income from assets and income from work. We've stopped the unfairness that a £10 million property can pay less council tax than a typical terrace house in much of England, and much more.
John Long.
Mr. Speaker, there seems to be only one word that the Chancellor understands: tax. Her decision to continue the freeze on income tax thresholds is a hammer blow to working people. In fact, even one of the Chancellor's favourite unions, Unison, has said that freezing personal income tax thresholds disproportionately impacts lower and middle income workers. So does the Chancellor agree with the Labour Party's union paymaster?
Minister.
I was a bit confused by that question there. You have to forgive me, Mr. Speaker, but the honourable member said that there was one word that was important. Let me give the member one figure, Mr. Speaker: £150. That's the amount we're taking off energy bills next year to help people deal with the cost of living in the here and now, supporting people because of the mistakes that previous governments made, not investing in our energy infrastructure and not investing in our future. We're picking up the pieces where they didn't make the decisions necessary.
So Ashley Fox.
Mr. Speaker, extending the freeze on income tax thresholds will cost working families £900 a year. It will also drag many pensioners into paying income tax for the first time. Why is he hitting these low-income families to pay more for welfare?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would suggest to the honourable member that he asks his front bench why 75% of the impact of people paying more tax at the lower end is a result of the decisions made by the previous government, who spent 7 years freezing income tax thresholds. It's a bit rich to talk about this government doing it for 3 when they did it for 7.
Martin Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What assessment has the Minister made of the impact for working people from the historic increase in the living wage?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for his question. Yes, we have chosen to uplift the national living wage and the national minimum wage, Mr. Speaker, so that those on low incomes are properly rewarded for their hard work. This will benefit 2.7 million people, including many people in his constituency and across the whole country, and I thank him and members, particularly on this side of the House, for their support for making sure we can make work pay up and down this country.
Mr. Speaker, pensioners in my constituency of Hartlepool who rely solely on the state pension have shared their concerns with me that freezing the tax threshold will draw them into tax. Can the Minister confirm what the Chancellor has already said publicly, that pensioners who rely solely on the state pension will not be taxed in this Parliament?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes.
Richard Fuller, the Conservative spokesperson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister said fair. No, no, no. Perhaps breaking the election promise on tax thresholds may be the reason why by 2 to 1 the public view the budget as unfair. Just 3% think it will make them better off, and 2 out of 3 think things will get worse. So, does the Minister want to tell the public they are wrong, or will he explain to the House why this budget has been received so badly by the British people?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The shadow spokesperson talks about fairness. Let me just identify one element of unfairness that he left in the tax system that this government is correcting, and that is a popular measure when we look at the views of the public up and down the country. We don't think it's fair on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, that someone in a £10 million property can pay less council tax than someone in a typical terrace house in his constituency, in my constituency, and constituencies across the whole of England. We are making that change to make things fairer in this country.
Jack Rankin.
Number 4, please, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The forecasts accompanying the budget set out that the Office for Budget Responsibility expect employment levels to rise in every year of this Parliament. They also set out that employment is forecast to be higher in every year than previously expected back in March.
Jack Rankin.
1 million young people not in work, education or training and 2.8 million out of work on long-term sickness benefits is both a financial catastrophe and a moral failure. The Prime Minister has rightly said it is his moral mission to get young people into work, but how does he square this with 2 budgets that have hiked taxes on working people by £66 billion whilst giving a pay rise to those on benefits?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member is right to call those things a moral and an economic disgrace. Do you know who created them? The party opposite. Who saw a 50% in neat numbers? The party opposite. Who created the benefit system that is failing today? The party opposite. Who failed to reform the benefit system? The party opposite.
Katrina Murray.
It's number 5, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we published the Financial Inclusion Strategy last month, outlining ambitious measures that will improve financial inclusion right across this country. I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for her advocacy on this issue through the APPG for debt and financial inclusion. And in line with the priorities outlined by that APPG, the strategy champions inclusive design to make products more accessible, increases debt advice capacity and supports financial independence for survivors of economic abuse.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the Minister's response. I am a long-standing member of the NHS Credit Union, which is one of the credit unions affected by the withdrawal of the Family Protection Plan by C Mutual on the 30th of November. Policyholders over the age of 70 who have paid premiums well in excess of what they would have expected to have paid out have been left in the lurch with no alternative provision given. I thank the Minister for what she has done so far in pursuing peace of mind for those who have tried to do the right thing and planned for their funerals. But in the interim, can I ask the Minister to bring all the stakeholders to the table to try and reach a solution that benefits particularly those policyholders?
Mr Speaker, as my honourable friend knows, I have been very sorry to hear of the difficulties of those affected by the withdrawal of this product, and I want to pay tribute to her for all of her efforts, and indeed those of her other colleagues as well, who are doing everything possible to assist constituents on this. My officials are monitoring this matter very closely, and we are encouraging anyone with information relevant to the FCA's investigation to go straight to the FCA. However, Mr Speaker, I would be more than happy to do as she suggests and get stakeholders together.
Tim Farron.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Access to banking is surely a key part of financial inclusion. The high street banks save £2 billion a year from having abandoned our high street and our town centres. And our post offices pick up the tab, and we're glad that they do. But they are not funded by the banks anywhere near enough to be able to maintain their presence. In Westmoreland, we have lost Hawkshead, Staveley and Grasmere post offices, and we're set to lose Shap and T-Bay, largely because the banks don't fund the post offices for doing their jobs properly. What's the Chancellor going to do to make them do that?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question. We very much understand the importance of in-person banking, including to rural communities and indeed beautiful communities like that he represents. But that's exactly why we're committed to rolling out 350 banking hubs right across the UK by the end of this Parliament. Over 240 hubs have been announced so far, and more than 190 are already open.
Garnish, Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, in the recently published Financial Inclusion Strategy, the Government says, and I quote, "Our aim is to create a culture in which everyone is supported to build a savings habit, building their financial resilience in the long term." Mr Speaker, what's not to like about that? But that makes the Chancellor's political decisions in the budget even more confusing. And just look at what was announced. Reducing the cash ISA limit to £12,000, scrapping a lifetime ISA, capping salary sacrifice schemes at £2,000, increasing tax on dividends by 2 percentage points, increasing savings income tax by 2 percentage points, freezing the repayment thresholds for student loans, freezing income tax thresholds for working people, freezing personal allowances thresholds for pensioners.
No, please, just sit down. No, don't challenge me. It's not a good idea. I'm just going to say, we did do quite a few days on the budget. I think we can all quite remember every point you're making. Is there anything you'd like to add? If you've carried on the list, forget it. Minister.
Mr Speaker, the shadow spokesperson makes reference to a number of changes in the budget which were pragmatic, responsible and fair, and I contrast that with their approach, which would return us to austerity, which would be both irresponsible and unfair.
Sir Julian Smith.
Question number 6, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With permission, I would like to answer this question together with question number 20. Small and medium-sized businesses are vital to our economy and our communities, and the Government's Small Business Strategy, published in July this year, sets out our approach to supporting them. As temporary pandemic business rates relief ends and the new revaluation comes into effect, we are supporting the High Street with £4 billion worth of support through transitional relief and our supporting small business schemes, as well as our long-term reforms to permanently lower the multipliers for eligible retail, hospitality and leisure properties, and support them with a significant package that will cap most of the increases for those who've seen large increases since the pandemic this year.
Sir Julian.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last week, Skipton was voted the happiest town to live in Britain. And one of the reasons for this, Mr Speaker, is its hospitality sector. And that hospitality sector, through COVID and then through energy cost rises and then NI and other challenges, is facing massive challenges. Can I urge the Government to look again at the issue of reliefs and multipliers, because over the weekend there have been so many pubs and hotels raising with me the fact they're not going to invest. We need the growth, we need the jobs. Can they just look at how they make things easier for the pub and hospitality industry?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think if I had such a charming Member of Parliament, I would also be as happy as his constituents in Skipton. I thank him for his question. Look, we considered the support really carefully in advance of the budget decisions that were announced last month. There is a challenge that the revaluation that was instigated by the previous government, is carried out independently by the Valuation Office Agency, does mean that some businesses have seen their values increase significantly since the pandemic. That's why this government is putting in £4 billion of support over the coming years, with around half of that coming next year to support businesses. Many will see their increases capped, Mr. Speaker, at either £800 or 15%. We do think that that support is going to provide significant help to those businesses, as well as the underlying reform that we're making to the system, Mr. Speaker, to rebalance the system in favour of the high street.
We're Hobbs.
Can I give him another example where the numbers simply do not stack up? Mr. B's independent bookshop in Bath will see their business rates will rise by over 70% after factoring in changes to rateable value. These changes were packaged as a move away from short-term fixes, yet vital discounts have been scrapped and replaced with less generous support and an unclear transitional relief system. How can he justify such a stark increase in business rates and really challenge our cherished bookshops? We have got 3 of them in Bath that we so like to have in Bath and want to support.
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's really important for all of us to make sure that we're communicating to the small businesses in our constituency, as I was doing this weekend, that there is a difference between the increase in the rateable value, and it may be that the business that she's referring to, and I like all good small independent bookshops myself, has seen a large increase in its value since the pandemic. But precisely because that has happened in some cases, we are implementing a very significant support package this year that will mean that no business that has a rateable value of less than £100,000 will see an increase in its bills of more than either 15% or £800. There's a bit of a technical detail there, which I'd be happy to go into with the member. But the important thing is there are significant protections in place this year on bills, even if rateable values have increased significantly since the pandemic.
Lewis.
Speaker, in Norwich there's a saying, there's a church for every Sunday and a pub for every day of the week. After 14 years of austerity, that's reduced down a lot. I think after this budget, I have many pub landlords at small and medium-sized businesses who tell me that we're not going far enough, that actually many of them will go under. They need more support, they need it soon, and if these changes go through, I fear that Norwich will not have that saying at all. We'll have hardly any pubs at all. And the point I will make is this: can we not put more of the burden on the pub companies, the big corporations who should be paying their fair share, rather than the small and medium-sized businesses and the small pub landlords who can't pay what's coming at them?
Have gone. Come on, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the things that we have announced at the budget is a rebalancing in the system away from those properties that have large rateable values towards the small businesses on our high street. That's worth almost £1 billion, that shift from the large to the smaller properties, supporting them within the business rate system as part of our work to reform business rates to support our high street.
Ruth Cadbury.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I also welcome the government's support for our high streets and also the consultation that the Treasury launched on the 25th of November around the business rate system. But it's not just high streets that are suffering until now. Under the current system, major transport infrastructure owners face crippling bills. Eurotunnel face a tripling of their business rate valuation from 2017 to now. So they have cancelled investment in their international international freight hubs. And under the current system, Heathrow Airport's business rates bill currently will increase by millions of pounds. So will the Treasury's consultation on the 25th of November give transparency and predictability?
Order. I think we've got to get it. I think it's the hospitality sector that might be using the rail industry somewhere with the freight, so I'm sure we can get something in there. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that many of us do jump on the train to then go and support our hospitality businesses. The consultation that my honourable friend mentions is actually a very important piece of work that we've published on the day of the budget. Chapter 4 of our call for evidence on how we can reform business rates to support investment will be really important, because we do recognise that airports, large infrastructure, they are valued in a different way, Mr. Speaker, than the rest of the business properties, and we do want to look at the changes that we can make to support those businesses who have seen very significant increases in their rateable values. They, of course, will be capped as well under the scheme that we have announced.
James Welsh, Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor promised a new golden era of hospitality, but the reality of her business rates raid, as the British Beer and Pub Association has said, is sleepless nights, pay cuts and staff layoffs for publicans, who will be paying an extra £13,000 on average. Why did the Chancellor last week tell businesses their taxes were going down when they're going up? And will she think again and change the multipliers?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The multipliers are a product of the change in the valuation, and they did come down, and then we brought them down even further for RHL businesses. I would say to the honourable member that without intervention this year, the bills paid by pubs would have increased by 45% as a result of the increase in value since the pandemic. Because of the significant intervention that this government is making this year, they were going up by 4%. That is the impact of the changes that this government has made.
Daisy Cooper, Liberal Democrat spokesman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. High street hospitality businesses are on a knife edge, and this is a disaster in the making. The government says that it has rebalanced business rates, but that is not the case. UK Hospitality says that the average increase for hospitality will be 76% over the next 3 years, compared to warehouses, offices and large supermarkets, which will only go up by 16%, 7% and 4%. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that the government repeatedly said it was going to introduce permanently lower business rates, and businesses heard that and made decisions based on what they heard. Now their bills are going up. So can I please implore the Minister, in the spirit of constructive opposition, please look again, please use powers to reduce the multiplier to minus 20p, and also look at emergency VAT cut too.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, we have set out our plans to reduce the multipliers for retail, hospitality and leisure properties. That is a rebalancing in the system. It does mean that they face the lowest tax rate, particularly the smallest RHL properties, in the system than since 1991. At the same time, there is she shakes her head, but the tax rate is the lowest it has been since 1991. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, because of the unwinding of the reduction in values going into the pandemic, that are now, because we're seeing a recovery, because businesses are bouncing back and their properties are worth more, there has been an increase in the values, and we're spending £2 billion this year capping those increases at either 5 or 15% for many of the businesses up and down the country.
Question number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Transport costs represent 14% of household spending, and so the government took the decisive action in the budget to freeze all regulated rail fares in England for 1 year from March 2026. That is the first time in 30 years that has happened.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Chancellor and the Transport Secretary for freezing rail fares next month, which will help ease commuting costs, especially for constituents in mine using Stevenage and Nebworth stations. However, affordability alone is only part of the railway jigsaw. Regeneration schemes like Stevenage Station Gateway, supported by the Government's Towns Fund, are part of a wider £1 billion regeneration programme for our town, and that's a real opportunity to modernise transport hubs and improve connectivity, help commuters get to work more easily. So will my right honourable friend ensure that infrastructure investment for projects like these are prioritised so commuters can get to work and local economies...
I'm sorry, the Chancellor's even ready now. Your season tickets run out. Come on, Chancellor.
I just want to talk about Stevenage, Mr. Speaker. The government action is saving commuters in Stevenage £285 a year on the cost of a 5-day season ticket. The government is also committed, with the uplift of £120 billion in capital spending, to the sorts of projects that my honourable friend mentions, particularly around transport hubs. And I will arrange for my honourable friend to have a meeting with the relevant Transport Minister.
Let's try another ticket. Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome the statement that the Chancellor has just made. Do I take that as an assurance that she will speak to her right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, and make sure that rail fares in Tunbridge do not increase when a second peak time service is introduced, when contactless is rolled out as far as Tunbridge? Because that, of course, would be a sleight of hand, and she would never want to do that.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. In Tunbridge as well, regulated fares will be capped, will be frozen for a year from March next year. I know that many of his constituents commute into central London every day, and that will mean that people in Tunbridge and in all of our constituencies, if they commute, will have a bit more money in their pockets.
Jack Abbott.
Question number 8, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to answer questions 8 and 13 together. The recent budget backs British innovation and aspiration by supporting businesses to start, scale and list in the UK. We've put in place a 3-year listing tax relief for firms that list here, and we're expanding enterprise tax reliefs to incentivise investment in scaling firms. This means more jobs, more growth and more British companies competing globally.
Jack Abbott.
Mr. Speaker, over the last 18 months, I've been working hard to drive investment into my town, county and region, and was proud to unveil the East of England's £4 billion investment prospectus at UK Reef earlier this year. However, I'm also keen to encourage our own homegrown entrepreneurs in Ipswich and Suffolk so we can better support innovative and high-growth businesses. So could the Minister outline how the 3-year stamp duty exemption on shares, alongside other measures in the budget, will seek to do this?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, at budget we introduced the UK listing relief, which incentivises companies to list in the UK. The UK raised more equity capital in 2024 than the next 3 European exchanges combined, and I look forward to seeing the brilliant entrepreneurs in my honourable friend's constituency benefit from these deep pools of capital.
John Slinger.
Mr. Speaker, in my constituency I can combine rugby and gin. So I'm grateful to the Chancellor for the measures in her budget to help the hospitality trade and small businesses. But following my visit to family-owned rugby distillery, branded and flavoured around the game, could I ask what steps her department could try to level the playing field, such as extending small producer relief to above the 8.5 ABV limit, 8.5%? Because small-scale producers find it harder to compete fairly with big producers, and we must help them tackle their challenges and convert their entrepreneurial spirit into greater success.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as someone who enjoys both rugby and gin, sometimes both at the same time, I pay tribute to my honourable friend's support for the businesses in his constituency. To support spirits producers, the government has put in place a range of measures, and as a small producer relief, I know that the Exchequer Secretary is open to the evidence of the operation of the new system. And I should add that the government plans to evaluate them in late 26, 3 years after they took effect.
I presume you mean rugby league as well. Sir Roger again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In East Kent, there is an entrepreneurial chain of coffee bars, 25 coffee bars, employing young people who otherwise would probably be unemployable. The profit margin on those 25 coffee bars for the last year was £12. The hospitality industry is on its knees. Will the Chancellor recognise the need to cut VAT on hospitality to 10%?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are putting in place a support package, as has been already covered by my colleagues, a £4 billion worth of support package, and we are continuing to engage with the hospitality sector. I should also add, Mr. Speaker, that we're easing licensing to help venues offer pavement drinks and one-off events as well.
Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the changes to the listings review, but would the Minister look at what's happening with R&D tax credits and the efficiency of the delivery of those tax credits? Because before businesses can get to listing, they are struggling when that doesn't work well enough.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to the honourable member for his question, as I always am. I think we are doing an awful lot, Mr. Speaker, including many measures announced at budget to support R&D in this country, including an additional £7 billion into specific areas within the industrial strategy.
Ewan Steinback.
Speaker, question number 9.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend will know, last year the government signed a £100 million Falkirk and Grangemouth growth deal with the Scottish Government. At the budget this year, we further recognise Grangemouth's centuries of history as a key UK industrial site by announcing additional investment of up to £14.5 million to support industrial projects that can create jobs. Alongside this, the National Wealth Fund is ready to invest £200 million alongside the private sector to help unlock Grangemouth's full potential and secure our clean energy future.
Ewan Steinback.
Additional 14 million plus to get new industry delivered quicker in Grangemouth, and the 25 million to finalise the Freeport in the budget 2 weeks ago is welcome. Forth Valley College is vital to giving local working class kids the skills they need to grasp the new opportunities that must come to Grangemouth. But it has been failed by the SNP Scottish Government's staggering 20% cut to colleges since 2021, and Alloa campus now faces closure. Will the Minister consider stepping in with direct skills support for this vital college?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, education and skills policy, including the funding and operation of colleges, is fully devolved to the Scottish Government, and that means it is for Scottish ministers to decide how to support Forth Valley College with the overall settlement. Now, Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend will know, the spending review provided the Scottish Government with their largest settlement in real terms since devolution in 1998, and the budget provided an additional £820 million for Scotland through the Barnett formula. Mr. Speaker, we will be campaigning in the months ahead to make sure decisions about how to invest that funding in Scotland's future are taken by Anna Sarwar and a Scottish Labour government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The challenges that they experience in the businesses of Forth Valley is the highest industrial energy prices in the G7. It's Labour's farm tax, Labour's family business tax, Labour's £26 billion raid on the cost of employing people, and Labour's fiscal drag on everybody earning, the Potemkin support for Grangemouth, the ambivalence to Mossmoran, and the unfunding of the Acorn project. How long does the Chancellor think Scotland should put up with this chaos from Westminster?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he's very happy to criticise tax decisions taken by this government. But where does he think the largest spending review settlement since devolution began came from? Where does he think the £820 million announced at the autumn budget came from? He needs to support tax decisions that we take if he wants the investment to go into Scotland.
Liam Conlon.
Question number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. With permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to answer this question with question number 19. Mr. Speaker, the Spending Review 2025 provided record investment in the NHS, including the largest ever health capital budget. That investment has enabled a reduction in waiting list of 230,000 with an extra 5.2 million NHS appointments. At Autumn Budget 2025, the Chancellor protected NHS investment by allowing it to retain and reinvest efficiency savings in 28-29, as well as making available upfront funding to abolish NHS England, a move that will unlock £1 billion in savings by the end of the Parliament, which can instead be used to support frontline care.
Liam Conlon.
For his response. When I was in sixth form, I became one of the, at the end of the last Labour government, I became one of the youngest people in Britain to have a hip replacement. And I will always be grateful to the incredible NHS staff who cared for me. But between 2011 and 2024, because of savage Tory cuts, the waiting list for hip replacements at King's College Hospital Trust, which serves my constituency of Beckenham and Penge, more than doubled. The Tories left thousands of people waiting months on end. With thanks to record investment from this Labour government, those waiting lists starting to fall. Will the Minister commit to continue this investment in the NHS?
Excellent.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and like him, I will always be grateful to the incredible NHS staff who got me back fighting strong after I was diagnosed with a neuromuscular condition in my 20s. Mr. Speaker, people across the country have stories like ours, and that is because we all depend on the NHS. And that is why it is such a priority for us as a government to invest in our health service, to get it back on its feet, and to build an NHS that is fit for the future.
Sam Nopper. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Chancellor for investing in our community care? In Stroud, the two beating hearts of our community are GP surgeries and our village pubs, which actually provide and reduce social isolation. So today, the publicans are all meeting in Stroud Brewery discussing the impacts of business rates. So could I invite the Minister to perhaps discuss with a pint, over a pint, how we can help our pub landlords?
But there we are. Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's right to point to the role that pubs play in the heart of local communities, so I assume the pub and GP surgeries are separate in the example that he gave there. Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend, the Exchequer Secretary, set out earlier, we're in a situation where temporary pandemic business rates relief is coming to an end and the new revaluation, which is post-pandemic, comes into effect. In that context, we're supporting the high street, including pubs, with permanently lower tax rates for eligible retail, hospitality and leisure, as well as a support package that means most properties seeing increases will see them capped at 15% or less next year, or £800 for the smallest.
Blackman.
One of the challenges the NHS faces is dealing with people that are street homeless and then have to go into hospital, obviously, for treatment. They're then discharged, and it's almost like a rotating saw, unfortunately. What is needed now is targeted funding to make sure that the NHS discharges people into somewhere they have a safe place to live. Will the Minister take that challenge up, particularly at this time of year?
Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question, and he's absolutely right to point to the fact that people showing up in hospital can often reflect other social issues, whether that be homelessness, child poverty, or other challenges that people face. As a government, we take tackling homelessness, by which I mean temporary accommodation and rough sleeping, incredibly seriously, and we'll be publishing a homelessness strategy shortly.
Mr. Speaker, Ashford and St Peter's Hospital, which serves my Woking constituency, has an £80 million repair backlog. When will the government allocate sufficient funding to fix our crumbling hospitals, including at Ashford and St Peter's?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman will know, the coalition government, which his party was part of, slashed capital investment in our health service. We've restored capital investment in our health service, which is critical to getting it back on its feet. And I hope that if he is making the request for greater investment in the NHS, he will change his mind and correct the record and support the tax changes we made to make that possible.
John Mill.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Me again. Mr. Speaker, growth is the #1 mission of this government, and we are committed to unlocking growth in every corner of this country. We have committed £2.7 billion per year to support sustainable farming, £2.3 billion of transport funding for places beyond city regions through the local transport grant, and more than £1.9 billion for gigabit broadband and 4G connectivity. This funding will help tackle key blockers to growth in rural areas, helping to unlock the opportunities and benefits of growth for people right across the UK.
John Mill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Later today, I'll be chairing a meeting of the APPG for rural business, which has a focus on generating rural growth. If we could push rural productivity closer to Western European averages, it would fix the government's budgetary black hole all by itself. So will the Minister agree to set a measurable target for increasing rural productivity so we can hold the government to account on progress?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I welcome the honourable gentleman for drawing attention to the importance of productivity in the UK economy and our prospects for growth, because as we know, Mr. Speaker, the Office of Budget Responsibility reviewed the productivity impacts of the previous government's record in office, and they found that the decisions the previous government had taken over their 14 years meant we had a £16 billion revenue hit at public finances over this in the target year of the scorecard. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know that that means productivity has been downgraded as a result of decisions taken by the previous government, but that gives us an opportunity. It gives us an opportunity not to be held back by the failures of the previous government and to exceed those forecasts in the future.
Noah Law.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Cornish communities and SMEs in the supply chains of Cornwall's most promising industries alike will have been delighted at the Chancellor's announcement of the Kerno Industrial Growth Fund in the recent budget. But does the Chief Secretary agree with me that these funds should be invested prudently, sustainably, and the proceeds recouped to the Cornish public's coffers so that they can be invested again in future projects?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and he and many of his neighbouring MPs are excellent advocates for Cornwall and for the benefits that Cornwall can bring to growth, both in the region where they represent and right across the country. I know that in the budget, the Chancellor was very keen to support investment in future industries in Cornwall. It's for the local council to deliver that. We'll be working closely with them to make sure that money is well spent. But the key thing for us, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that we are enabling people in Cornwall to be part of the economic growth mission of this government.
Rachel for the Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As this is my last question before Christmas, I want to ask my counterpart a nice and constructive question. As he will know, rural residents and businesses already pay more on fuel than their urban counterparts, and there are fewer public transport options. So can he advise what were the results of his assessment of the relative impact on rural compared to urban areas of the budget's introduction of road pricing?
Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman was referring to the changes we announced in budget around electric vehicles and their contribution towards public finances. Mr. Speaker, if people drive electric vehicles, wherever in the country they drive them, they benefit from investment in roads and maintenance alongside those of us who drive petrol cars. So it's important to make sure that we make the tax system fit for the future. Mr. Speaker, this is a decision which people have talked about for many years. His party ducked that alongside many other difficult decisions. We are taking them head on to make sure we are fit and stable for the future.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 1.
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. COVID, fraud and error under the previous government's mismanagement cost the taxpayer £10.9 billion. They played fast and loose with the public purse and left the front doors wide open to fraud. That is why I've appointed a COVID Corruption Commissioner to carry out the independent review. This government is doing everything to recover taxpayers' money. We've already got back around £400 million, with more to come. That money belongs to the British people, in our communities and in our NHS. We welcome the publication of the Commissioner's independent report and we will respond fully in the new year.
Lorraine Beavers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The British people are paying the bill for criminal COVID fraud. Under the Conservatives, waste and corruption exploded and taxpayers' money was stolen. Will the Chancellor make sure that the Labour government continues to go after those who stole from the British taxpayer and make sure we get every penny back?
Chancellor.
I couldn't agree more with my honourable friend. The previous government failed to protect public money, while this government has generated around £400 million in getting money back. And we all know what happened. The Tories dished out contracts to their friends and their donors, money that never belonged to them. This government will leave no stone unturned because that money belongs to taxpayers, not with cronies or crooks.
We come to the Shadow Chancellor, Sir Melstride.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the process surrounding the budget was utterly chaotic. We had months of damaging speculation, fuelled by briefings and leaks from the Treasury itself. That included briefings on the 14th of November, which moved markets and gave the appearance, at least, of being deliberately inaccurate, which is why we need the FCA to investigate. But can I ask the Chancellor a simple question? Did she at any point authorise or allow confidential details of the budget or the forecast to be briefed to the press? Yes or no?
Chancellor.
No.
Sir Melstride.
Mr. Speaker, the OBR's own guidance says, and I quote, "The interim rounds are transmitted to the Chancellor in confidence." Yet the Chancellor repeatedly stated before the budget that the OBR had downgraded their productivity forecasts. In her statement in Downing Street on the 4th of November, she said in relation to the OBR's forecast, and I quote, "It is already clear that the productivity performance is weaker than previously thought." Why did the Chancellor breach the confidentiality of the OBR?
Chancellor.
Well, In the spring statement, the OBR were clear that productivity was coming in lower than forecast, and they were clear that they were reviewing that over the summer. The numbers that the OBR have since published showed that in the final pre-measures forecast, the fiscal headroom was just over £4 billion. I was clear in my speech on the 4th of November. I didn't want to reduce the headroom. I wanted to increase it. I increased it to bring back the stability that's much needed in our economy after 14 years of Conservative government.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Having worked on child poverty for over a decade, I've seen first-hand the damage to health, education prospects and life chances that poverty can cause, put at £40 billion a year by Child Poverty Action Group. Can the Chancellor assure me that the child poverty strategy will build on the historic budget announcement on the two-child cap and do more to reverse the appalling rise in poverty that we saw from the benches opposite?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the child poverty strategy published last week sets out the steps we are taking to support families now, as well as the building blocks we are putting in place for the long term. We will lift 550,000 children out of poverty, both by removing the two-child limit and through other measures, including the expansion of free school meals.
Ashley Forbes.
Mr. Speaker, unemployment is higher today than on the day the Chancellor took office. Would you tell the House why that is the case?
Chancellor.
Well, employment is up since we took office, and part of the reason for the disparity between those numbers is that people who were economically inactive are now seeking work. That's exactly what we want, for people to be seeking work and to get back into work. But there are more jobs in the economy today than when we took office.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a former deputy head teacher, I and other school leaders knew of the pressures faced by having to turn libraries into classrooms due to underfunding by the Tories, disproportionately affecting children in our deprived areas. Does the Chancellor agree her £5 million commitment for libraries and books for secondary schools is an example of how increasing opportunity for all children is good for our future economy?
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, my honourable friend will know that when I was at secondary school, my school library was turned into a classroom because there were more students than there was space. We have put £10 million into primary schools to get a library at every single primary school in this Parliament. And next year, to celebrate the National Year of Reading, we're putting £5 million into having more books at secondary schools, and I'm really proud to be doing that.
Matt Nichols.
110,000 jobs have been lost in the hospitality sector since this government came to office, and 8 pubs are closing every week, but the Chancellor's made it worse. Jonathan at the Devonport has told me that his business rates are set to treble. Does the Chancellor realise that her budget will cost people their jobs, landlords their businesses and communities their pubs?
Minister.
Let's be clear, nobody's business rate bills are tripling. It's important, as members of Parliament, if we have businesses coming to us to talk about the increases in their rateable values because of the unwinding of the effect of the pandemic, that we are clear on all sides of this House that the government has put in support to make sure that pubs and those who've seen their values go up will not increase next year. If the pub's rateable value is more than £100,000, they'll be capped at a 30% increase. If it's less, they'll be capped at 15% or 800. That's £4 billion of support, Mr. Speaker, that this government is providing.
Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. An independent and effective OBR is critical for our country, but it needs to do better. Why can't the OBR count? Why can't it forecast accurately, given the economy grew 50% faster than they predicted in March? And why can't it even publish the budget document without making a dog's breakfast of it? So, isn't it time for the OBR to properly price pro-growth measures and get behind our growth mindset?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can be clear that we are committed to the OBR's independence as our forecaster and to the core role it plays within our fiscal framework. The Chancellor has also been clear, however, that forecasts are not our destiny. We will not let Britain be held back by the failures of the previous government. At the budget, the OBR revised upward its growth estimate for this year, and we are determined to exceed forecasts again.
Scotland.
Public R&D is so powerful for economic growth that US patents funded by it generate 12 times more growth than those that are not. But does the Chancellor accept the judgment of the OBR that UK public R&D will generate no additional incremental growth because we are not increasing it enough?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, the Government of course recognises that innovation is key to our long-term economic growth, to higher productivity and indeed to living standards as well. And that's exactly why we're investing more in R&D, and we've made other incentives available too.
Then make Elliott.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, it's been a rocky week for the Office for Budget Responsibility, so I'm glad that the Chief Secretary recognises and has reiterated the value of an independent regulator in this space. Nevertheless, a lot of swirling around and criticism of the OBR. Would the Chief Secretary or the Chancellor like just to remind people about the role of the Fiscal Risks and Sustainability Report, which does look longer term at the economy, and the importance this has in the planning, and as the Chief Secretary said, the Chancellor's as a point that it is not a destiny just because of the figures, but this report is particularly useful in this respect.
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I have huge respect for the Office for Budget Responsibility and I reappointed Richard Hughes for a second term earlier this year. We deeply regret the publication of the budget document ahead of the budget. Richard Hughes has apologised for that and he's resigned, but I thanked him for his leadership of the OBR. But my honourable friend is right to point to the longer term risks that the OBR also point out, and that's why at the budget we took measures like what we did on electric vehicles and on high value properties, because we need to reform the tax system so it works for the future.
Brother.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The cost of delivering public services in rural Britain is higher than it is in urban areas. The cost of accessing services in rural places like West Dorset is higher for communities than it is in urban Britain. Will the Treasury commit to reviewing the funding formula so that local government, ICBs, the police, the fire services, all of our vital community services get the funding that rural communities deserve?
Yeah. Minister.
Mr Speaker, the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government recently published the English Indices of Deprivation 2025, which included the supplementary report on how deprivation manifests in rural areas. I can assure the honourable gentleman the Government will further consider these assessments of deprivation as well as other inputs when deciding funding models for local areas.
Dave Robertson.
My constituents across Lichfield, Burntwood and the villages will be pleased to see the government taking action on the cost of living by reducing energy bills, but they will want those benefits to be felt fairly by all bill payers. Can I ask what steps the Chancellor will be taking with Cabinet colleagues to ensure that reductions in energy bills are reflected in standing charges and not just in unit prices?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Energy bills are too high. The Conservatives left Britain dependent on the rollercoaster of gas prices and left families paying almost £2 billion on their bills for their failed energy efficiency eco scheme. So we are scrapping eco and taking some of the expensive levies off bills. My honourable friend makes an important point on standing charges. He will know that Ofgem is continuing to look at low standing charge tariffs for exactly the reason he raises. And more generally, reducing energy bills is so important precisely because they are typically a higher share of disposable income for low-income households.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. There is agreement across this House on the importance of access to cash, but also the importance of access to banking services. It's critical for high streets in areas such as Cooper and Leven in my constituency. But when will the Government agree to have the FCA review the criteria in terms of access to banking services? Because 350 hubs is a meaningless number when communities continue to lose face-to-face services.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm afraid I have to disagree with that 350 is a meaningless number, but we of course understand the importance of in-person banking to rural communities. The location of the banking hubs is determined independently by link, and the criteria are a matter for the FCA. But I regularly meet with MPs to discuss the adequacy and the application of those rules. In fact, I've got a banking hub surgery for members of Parliament tomorrow, which would be more than welcome to join.
Jill Jarman.
Mr Speaker, I warmly welcome the second rise to the national minimum wage under this government, with 160,000 workers in Wales already benefiting since the rise in April. Many of these will be younger workers, particularly in the retail and hospitality sector, so important to my constituency in Clwyd North this Christmas and beyond. What assessment has been made of the impact of the rise in the national minimum wage on younger workers, and what progress has been made for equalising the national minimum wage for under 21s?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, around 300,000 young workers are expected to benefit from the national minimum wage increases in April 2026. The remit for the Low Pay Commission asked that they develop their preferred path and pace for the equalisation of the 18 to 20 national minimum wage and the national living wage. The 18 to 20 national minimum wage rate from April 2026 makes steps towards this commitment.
Alison Bennett.
The government seems set on pushing through with the family farm tax, despite opposition on these benches and indeed on theirs.
Shame.
Despite this, will the Minister at least revisit the forestalling clause, which would help older farmers in mid-Sussex and across the country avoid the consequences of backdating this legislation?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We at the budget came forward with a revision to the policy to support those people whose spouses have already passed away and made the allowance transferable between the spouses. That is a change will reduce the number of farms that are affected by the agricultural property relief changes from around 500, as was estimated at last budget, to now 375 when coupled with some changes to the underlying economic forecasts. This policy raises money from those with the largest estates in a fair way, and I would encourage members on all sides of the House to consider whether or not we need to... Well, I'll stop there, Mr. Speaker.
Alison Young.
Dennis is a British electric bus manufacturer employing more than 700 people in Scarborough. Major bus contracts are due to go live in early 2026. Will the Minister confirm that this government is backing British-built buses over Chinese imports? And can he confirm that the changes to public procurement processes will be implemented in time for taxpayers' money to be spent on buying British buses?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have a proud history of manufacturing in this country, including in my honourable friend's constituency, and we will capitalise on that history as we drive our future growth. The UK is a leader in bus manufacturing, and the government is committed to supporting the sector, including through the Department for Transport's UK Bus Manufacturing Expert Panel. Mr. Speaker, as a government, we want to back British buses, unlike the SNP.
The government created the National Wealth Fund to encourage investment in innovation in sectors critical such as clean energy and sustainable aviation fuel. So how will the Chancellor make sure that the Wealth Fund will use different and maybe even better risk criteria than existing commercial banks and financial entities?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the National Wealth Fund is at the forefront of public investment, investing in early-stage companies and projects to support innovation, boost jobs and create growth. It will work closely and collaboratively with other public financial institutions like the British Business Bank, Innovate UK and UK Research and Innovation to support innovative companies across the UK.
Sarah Owen.
Mr. Speaker, removing the two-child benefit cap means that 5,000 children in Luton North will be lifted out of poverty. Many live in households where parents work but ends still do not meet. Does the Chancellor agree that action like this and the Youth Guarantee Scheme will end the vicious cycle of poverty for good?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for this question and all the campaigning work that she has done on it. The two-child limit, combined with the changes we're making around free school meals, the warm homes discount, capping the cost of school uniform, rolling out more childcare to more families, will lift more families, more children out of poverty. And it is worth noting that around 70% of kids who are growing up in poverty are in a family where someone works.
Stephen Bott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Office for Budget Responsibility shows that welfare spending will be £32 billion a year more at the end of this Parliament, just as a result of decisions in the last budget. Why was the Chancellor not more honest in the Labour Party manifesto about the choices she wanted to take?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The welfare state the party opposite created is failing, and we are changing it. Welfare spending rose 3 times as fast under the party opposite than it did under this one because they created a broken welfare system. And to repeat, Mr. Speaker, we will change it.
Antonia Banks.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Last week I went to Anacast in Wednesbury, one of our brilliant foundries. I've also been to Newby foundries, and both have told me of their relief that the landfill tax is not going to impose significant additional costs on them. I wonder if the Chancellor would like to set out the action she is taking to support our brilliant manufacturing and automotive industries at this budget.
It's an easy one. Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. We're backing building and getting Britain building with the planning and infrastructure bill that passed yesterday. I think without the support of the party opposite, but frankly, we don't need them. And we are backing our automotive sector with changes to the ECOS scheme, the electric car grant, and so much more. We're backing the British manufacturing industry, both automotives, buses, trains and everything else.
Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, prior to the election, the Daily Record reported the Chancellor as having said that Labour will be as economically radical as Thatcher. Well, with the closures at Grangemouth and Mossmore and uncertainty over the Acorn project and 1,000 jobs being lost every month in the North Sea, have I finally found a promise that this Chancellor's kept?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman knows, we are backing Grangemouth and have put money into the Acorn carbon capture and storage project. We're taking £150 off people's energy bills in Scotland, and in England and Wales, NHS waiting lists are falling. I wonder why they're still increasing in Scotland.
Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Short-term
Mr. Dugan, what is it about you? Always wanting to shout at the wrong time, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Short-term lets cover up to 20% of homes in parts of my constituency. Not only are they eroding communities, I'm concerned that they are not fully paying their tax. What steps would the Chancellor take to address the fact that data from Airbnb suggests that as many as 6,000 homes are being let on short-term lets and vanishingly few are actually registered to pay business rates? Will she meet with me to discuss this issue and how we can recover the tax up to hundreds of millions?
Yes, I'll do.
I thank my honourable friend for her question and her continued campaigning on this issue that I know is so important to her constituents. For those who seek to bend the rules, the companies like Airbnb now send HMRC data on all their hosts. Where hosts fail to provide the detail that HMRC requires, Airbnb stop the payments until they do so, Mr. Speaker. But we do need to go further, and I will meet with my honourable friend to discuss this.
Brilliant, Simon Hall.
In the hope that the government had listened to the NFU and others, a North Dorset farming family sat in expectation to the Chancellor's statement for the budget. They were disappointed with the announcements on the family farm tax. He withdrew his medical treatment. 3 days later, he died. So determined was he to keep that family farm within his family, and knowing the struggle that they would have had to have met the tax bills post the 1st of April. I share that not to be inflammatory. I just wanted to make sure that the Treasury bench knows that their decision on the family farm tax has direct consequences to people up and down the country.
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for that question. The Treasury bench is fully aware of the fact that changes to inheritance tax do, of course, have an effect on those who are older. That is why we have made sure that we have, in the changes that we have put forward that affect both agricultural property and business property, we have a higher allowance with an extra £1 million, and we have a tax rate that is half as low as everyone else pays. We think that these reforms that do raise money in a fair and sustainable way will both contribute to us to be able to raise the revenue that we need and do so in a way that protects family farms. But of course, we understand that there will be impacts on people. That's why we've designed the policy in the way that we have, and we've come forward, Mr. Speaker, with the changes that we announced at the budget just a few weeks ago.
John Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2024, £6,200. 2025, £15,000. 2026, £19,100 after discounts. Independents are really struggling now with the revaluation of business rates. Will the Minister meet with York High Street Forum to really understand the challenge it brings to my city?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I would be happy to speak with my honourable friend about the issues that she raises in her constituency.
Rupert Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor has embarked on a Fabian programme of brutal tax and spend economics that might please the dwindling number of Labour voters, but is hollowing out the nation's productive base. Those who take risk, invest long-term and create high-quality jobs are increasingly voting with their feet. Record numbers of top earners, the rainmakers who actually bankroll public services, are leaving the UK for good, taking their wealth, but more importantly, their brain power with them. Does the Chancellor even begin to understand the lasting and irreversible damage she is causing to the British economy?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've all watched the honourable member voting with his feet by leaving the bunch of crazies that he was part of before this. Now, let's get back to what this government is actually doing to drive growth, increasing public investment by £120 billion over this Parliament and making sure things get built. Building housing, a default yes for developments around train stations. Building transport, the Lower Thames crossing, the expansion of Heathrow and Gatwick airports. Energy at Sizewell and Wilfer. This is a government backing the builders month after month after month.
Next bit.
Mr. Speaker, the Pensions Minister was brilliant at the budget at helping our mining communities across the UK. Can I, though, ask for an update on plans for the changing of the surplus sharing arrangements for both the Miners' Pension Scheme and the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend has been a powerful campaigner for these pension schemes to those surpluses to be shared with their members. He knows that we've made an announcement at the budget to make sure that the coal scheme surplus is shared with its members, and I know that the trustees are bringing forward their proposals on the sharing of future surpluses.
Alan Mack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The budget cut the VCT tax relief that allowed investors to back Britain's fastest growing companies. How can the Chancellor claim to support our entrepreneurs, which is cutting off the funding they rely on?
Chancellor.
Well, I hosted an event last night for entrepreneurs, and speaking at it with the chief executives of Contexa and of Motorway, both of whom welcomed the changes that we'd made to support entrepreneurs at the budget, particularly the changes we'd made around EMI, EIS, VCT, and also the 3-year stamp duty holiday for companies choosing to list here in Britain. We're backing entrepreneurs in Britain, and they're backing our changes.
That completes questions. We'll let the front bench change over. Before we come to the urgent question on Operation Kenova, I remind the House that there is an ongoing waiver to allow limited reference to any active legal proceedings relating to the historical troubles-related deaths. Any references to such cases should be limited to the context and to the events that led to the cases, but not to the detail of the cases themselves, nor the names of those involved in them. Members should always take special care to avoid saying anything that might interfere with the course of justice. Can I say, I thought it wouldn't have been a WMS, I thought it would have been a statement to the House. When all the news channels are carrying such a major subject, I really do think this House will have had the benefit. That's why I've granted the UQ. Right, Gavin Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I am grateful for you granting this urgent question to ask the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland if he will make a statement on the latest publication from Operation Kenova and the Government's response to its findings.
Stay.
I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman for his question, and I want to inform the House that I will be laying a written ministerial statement on this matter later today. Operation Kenova has published its final report, which covers the activities of the alleged agent Steakknife, as well as other investigations referred to it by the PSNI. I want to begin by commending the Kenova team, led by Sir Ian Livingston and John Boucher, for the exemplary way they carried out their work, built trust with families, put victims first, and provided many answers about what happened to their loved ones. Operation Terma, which was part of Kenova, resulted in the prosecution of an individual now extradited from Ireland and awaiting trial for the murder of 3 RUC officers in 1982. Kenova has set a standard for future legacy investigations, and we've drawn on a number of those lessons in drafting the Troubles Bill. I wish to express my heartfelt condolences to all the families who lost loved ones in the appalling circumstances described in this sobering report. Operation Kenova was asked to establish whether there was evidence of criminal offences by the alleged agent known as Steak Knife or their alleged handlers. The behaviour described of the alleged agent and their role in the provisional IRA is deeply disturbing. It should not have happened. And in recent decades, there have been significant reforms to agent handling practice, including through legislation. The use of agents is nowadays subject to strict regulation overseen by the Investigatory Powers Commissioner and the Investigatory Powers Tribunal. On Operation Kenova's request to the government to name Steak Knife, I told Sir Ian Livingstone in August that, and I quote, "Due to ongoing litigation relevant to the neither confirm nor deny policy, namely the Thompson Supreme Court appeal, a substantive and final response to your request will be provided after judgment has issued in that case." The government's first duty is, of course, to protect national security, and identifying agents risks jeopardising this. Today's report also makes public the high-level findings of Operation Denton, which looked at killings carried out by the UVF Glenanne gang. The behaviour reported on, including collusion by individual members of the security forces, is shocking. The government will respond to the full Denton report when it is published, bearing in mind that there are related legal proceedings ongoing in this case and in the case of Steak Knife. The government responded to a number of the other recommendations in the interim Kenova report in August. This is available in the library and is also addressed in the written ministerial statement.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Secretary of State for that response and for being here this afternoon, to discuss Operation Kenova. I know that when the Secretary of State was appointed, he has spent an inordinate amount of time on legacy, and I know that he is committed to the principles of not rewriting the past and of ensuring that issues can be explored to the fullest degree. He knows that in Northern Ireland, peace was only secured because of the actions of our intelligence services, our armed forces and brave members of the RUC. He knows that the IRA were brought to their knees by the activities of our intelligence services. And he also knows that the IRA were riven by agents of the state. Both Dennis Donaldson, the Director of Operations for Sinn Féin, and Freddie Scappaticci, the head of the Internal Investigations Unit, also known as Steak Knife. Can I ask the Secretary of State, does he welcome the finding of Operation Kenova that there was no high-level state collusion between paramilitaries, loyalist paramilitaries, and members of the army or the security forces? Does he recognise the important role that our intelligence services did play in securing peace in Northern Ireland? Does he recognise that the IRA were riven by informers? Does he realise the absurdity of maintaining the position that Operation Kenova could not name Freddie Scappaticci as Steak Knife? Does he recognise, in the findings relating to the Dublin and Monaghan bombings, that the UK state authorities had no information or intelligence that could have prevented those bombings? And does he recognise, in the context of the debate we are having on legacy, that there are too many inquiries he is letting pass by without highlighting the lack of accountability on the Dublin government, on the Republic of Ireland and their role in supporting the IRA? And we cannot wait until the conclusion of his legislative process or inquiry after inquiry until they open their books, share their stories, and indicate in the basis of truth and justice the role they played in our troubled past.
To the right honourable gentleman for those points, and I join him in recognising the huge contribution that was made by the intelligence services and by the Army and by the RUC and other security forces during the Troubles to try and keep people safe, and to defeat those who were trying to destroy society as a result of their terrorism. And we all recognise that. And the responsibility for the killing of around 1,700 people, the murder, often in the most brutal circumstances, and in some cases killing people, burying them, and then for a long time providing no information as to where the remains of people's loved ones were to be found, rests with the Provisional IRA. And I echo the comments that were made in the interim report and in the final report about what they did. I note, of course, what the report has to say in not finding any evidence of high-level collusion between the security forces and loyalist paramilitaries, in particular the UVF, in respect of the work of the Glenanne gang, as they have been called. But I do notice what they said about individual collusion. And I use the word shocking deliberately, because to learn now that serving police officers, so Operation Kenova reports, and serving members of the armed forces were colluding with those who were murdering people, a very large number of people, over 120 people were murdered by that gang. On the final point that he raises about all of us wishing to learn from the past, and I think in order to learn from the past, one has to try and tell the truth about the past, I would simply draw his attention to the framework agreement reached between the UK government and the Irish government in September, the steps that have been taken, which he and I have debated many times before, by the Irish government to cooperate with the OMA inquiry, and the commitment that they have given to the fullest possible cooperation with a reformed legacy commission, which the government's Troubles Bill is seeking to put in place with the consent and will of the House. And I hope that all members would welcome that, because the more information we can get about what happened, the more families will be able to find out exactly what took place in respect of their loved ones.
Chair of the Committee, Tony Antoniazzi.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As my committee's report on legacy outlined last week, information disclosure has been and remains one of the biggest challenges with legacy investigations. The Kenova report outlines the failure of MI5 to disclose all relevant material pertaining to steak knife in a timely manner. The PSNI Chief Constable said today he remains concerned there continues to be an unhelpful, unnecessary and protectionist approach to the disclosure of official records. Given these comments, Mr Speaker, and the significant concerns outlined in our report on the government's new approach to disclosure, how can families have confidence in the new process?
Well, I'm very grateful to the Chair of the Select Committee for what she has just said. She refers to the unfortunate episode in which MI5 discovered further files relating to the work of Operation Kenova, which they hadn't been able to identify previously. The Kenova report does say that they have no reason to believe that those reports, those files were withheld. It was MI5 was not able to find them, and the head of MI5 set up a process to review exactly what had occurred. I think it is essential that all of us are able to say that when the bodies that are charged with investigating what happened in the past, and that includes the current ICRIR, which will become the Legacy Commission under our legislation, it is the case under the current Legacy Act that the ICRIR has the ability to request and to see all information, and that will remain the case when it comes to the reformed Legacy Commission, because the Commission has the ability to deal with closed material. The coronial system does not, as the House is aware, and it is vital, precisely as she puts it, for the confidence of families that they know that the people who are trying to find out what happened to their loved ones are able to see all of the relevant material.
Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Thank you for granting this urgent question. And I congratulate my honourable friend from Belfast East for asking it and for his excellent contribution just now. This is a very significant and highly detailed report, which I know honourable members will want to take some time to digest. But this side of the House would like to thank all those who've contributed to it, and also to remember all of those who suffered during that very, very difficult time. The last Conservative government apologised for collusion following the De Silva review into the murder of Patrick Finucane. And whilst it is sobering to read further accounts of collusions between a small number of agents of the British state and paramilitaries, it is important to set this alongside a number of findings in the report today. First is the understanding, as mentioned by the Secretary of State, that legislation has changed dramatically since the time in question, under the last Labour government, but also under the last Conservative government. Second, it's important to highlight that although the review found that there were a small number of rogue actors, they did not find, and I quote, any evidence that collusion occurred at a political or strategic level, and that there was no evidence which indicates that the RUC at an organisational level was involved or complicit with the activities of extremists or terrorists. So I think it's very important that those findings are not lost. Third, as my honourable friend from Belfast East said, the review found that of the 1974 Dublin and Monaghan bombings, there was no specific intelligence which, if acted upon, could have prevented those bombings. And it did not manage to find any evidence that there was intelligence that would indicate that British security forces were colluding with the UVF in those attacks. But again, historic findings, I think, today. I'd be very interested to hear from the Secretary of State if he would be prepared to come back at a later date and tell us more about the government's future position on neither confirm nor deny. I understand that there's a case going on at the moment, but I believe that once that's done, it would be very important for the government to be clear with the House about how it sees that policy going forward. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, as has already been raised, there have been a number of reviews, detailed reviews and necessary reviews into collusion between agents of the British state and paramilitaries, but as yet no such reviews on the Irish side. Will the Secretary of State tell us whether the Irish government has told him by when they intend to present their own legislation?
Well, I am grateful to the honourable gentleman for his comments and the spirit and tone in which he delivers them on this extremely serious matter. I do indeed acknowledge, as I think I've already indicated, what he said about the nature of the collusion that has been discovered, what it was and what it was not, including in relation to the Dublin Monaghan bombings. Those are very, very important findings. It is for the Irish government to determine what information they reveal, but they have given commitments to me and to the UK government, and indeed to all of us, about the cooperation that they will provide. The Taoiseach has said to me that by March, the legislation to allow witness testimony to be given to the Omagh bombing inquiry will be in place, and we look forward to seeing in due course the outline of the Irish government legislation that will implement the rest of the commitments when it comes to cooperation with the new Legacy Commission, which we are seeking to establish by means of the legislation currently before the House. I am always happy to return to the House to provide further information and to answer further questions. But we are waiting for the Thompson judgment, which is absolutely about the neither confirm nor deny policy, which is why when I wrote to Sir Ian Livingstone on I think it was the 13th of August, I said to him what I quoted in my original answer to the right honourable gentleman's question.
Well, I think
it's important, Mr. Speaker, to firstly say that the people responsible for the murder of innocent people in Northern Ireland over many decades were the people who carried out those murders and the organisations that they were members of. But it is also very clear, Mr. Speaker, through these reports and previous investigations, that elements within the British state worked hand in glove with loyalist paramilitaries as they murdered scores and hundreds of innocent people in the north of Ireland, and also that the IRA were riddled with informers, including, clearly, at the very highest levels. So now that we know all of that, Mr. Speaker, has the Secretary of State made an assessment of how many lives could have been saved and how much earlier could we have had peace in Ireland if the British government had acted properly?
Well, I would say to my honourable friend, I have not made such an assessment. Now, Operation Kenova itself had something to say about, in relation to the activities of the alleged agent Steakknife. Their view was that the balance, I hate to use the word, the balance sheet, lives lost and lives saved, was not quite as it had been described by others. What I think is particularly important about the report today, and it confirms a point that John Boucher made, Mr. Speaker, when he published the interim report, because he said that in the absence of information about what happened, people form a view about what they think happened, and as a result, what is finally produced, and there is an example of that in relation to the final Operation Kenova report, it might turn out that it's not quite what everybody thought it was. And that is the argument for trying to be as open as possible about what happened. But I wanted to be clear in coming to the House today that what is revealed, as I've said, is disturbing and deeply shocking and should not have happened. And it's really important that we learn the lessons.
Paul Cole, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Right Honourable Member for Belfast East for his question and the Secretary of State for his answer. I have three questions. Does the Government accept the Operation Kenova report findings of serious organisational failure by MI5? And if so, what concrete steps will it take to address these failures? Secondly, is the Secretary of State satisfied his proposed legacy legislation contains adequate safeguards to ensure that honourable former service personnel who served lawfully and with integrity and followed orders in good faith do not fear persecution on the basis of the unlawful actions by the rogue individuals or the state? And thirdly, does the Secretary of State agree that the neither confirm nor deny policy must be exercised in a proportionate and necessary manner, should not be used to protect agents who commit gross serious crime nor hide any serious misdeeds of the state?
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his question. I would say on the subject of our legislation and safeguards, it contains a number of very specific safeguards that are in the bill because of our commitment to the veterans who served with such bravery in the most difficult circumstances. But I've also indicated to the House that as the bill progresses, I am open to a continuing conversation with members on all sides of the chamber and with the Royal British Legion and the other organisations representing veterans, so we get this right. I would say about the neither confirm nor deny policy that it is really important for our national security, because the ultimate responsibility of governments is to protect national security. And the moment that the neither confirm nor deny policy starts to be eroded, although there have been a small number of cases in which it has been set aside for particular reasons, the moment that happens, it undermines the confidence of those who are serving the state today to keep us safe, because they may start to ask themselves, is that lifelong commitment not to reveal anything about what I've done, is the government still going to uphold them? So it's a really, really important protection for those who do very dangerous things in order to try and protect all of us. And finally, in relation to MI5, I responded in answer to the chair of the Select Committee about the information that was subsequently discovered. But of course, the use of agents, covert human intelligence sources, is nowadays subject to regulation under the Regulator of Investigatory Powers Act 2000 and the CHIS Criminal Conduct Act 2021. Both of those bits of legislation show the determination of the House to learn from what has gone wrong in the past.
Mike Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that this was a brutal, murderous conflict, but as we are reminded today, it was internecine as well at times.
There will be days like this, in the phrase of one of Northern Ireland's famous sons. But will the Secretary of State agree with me that even on days like this, we should continue to keep victims and families at the forefront of our thoughts?
I agree with my honourable friend very, very strongly in what he has just said. And in one sense, the great contribution that Operation Kenova has made to doing precisely that has been the way it has dealt with the families, kept in touch with the families, told them what they were able to discover, what they weren't able to discover, and they had their Victims and Survivors Advisory Group, and we have taken that idea, because all the people I spoke to said that really worked well in Kenova, and we have put it into the bill that the House is currently considering, because learning the lessons is not just reflecting on the horror that this report reveals, but also learning from the way they went about dealing with families, because it's really important that the Commission, I know they're working hard to do that at the moment, is able to win the confidence of families. So when they do tell them, I can tell you this and I can't tell you that, and I haven't been able to find out the following, families will have confidence they've done their darndest to discover what really went on.
Sir Julian.
I'm sure the Secretary of State will agree that running any double agent inside a murderous organisation is bound to be a moral nightmare. The justification for such action is always, as it should be, that many more lives will be saved as a result of doing this, even if the agent is implicated in illegal and indeed murderous activities. What's unusual about this case is that it appears to be that more lives were not saved by this particular operation. Can the Secretary of State say whether the agencies accept that this particular operation was counterproductive even in its own terms, and if he can't share that with us openly, could it at least be shared confidentially with the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament?
Well, the Intelligence and Security Committee may well wish to look at the Operation Kenova report and to ask questions. And in the first part of the Right Honourable Gentleman's contribution, he put an important hypothetical point about the difficulty of balancing these considerations. But there is no doubt that the contribution that agents make are very important to protecting our national security, and as a number of members have already indicated to the House, were very, very important in the fight against those who are trying to destroy society in Northern Ireland and were responsible for killing so many people during the course of the Troubles.
Trina Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I commend my right honourable friend for Belfast East for securing this urgent question. We have already talked about the experiences of the Kenova families in having the confidence in this process and recognise the complexity of what the situation has been of the 28 years of the Troubles. And you've already highlighted yourself that the statement of the lack of transparency and the lack of answers leaves a place where avoid the worst fears fill on behalf of relatives. That makes the section of the Troubles bill that's currently undergoing through legislative process even more important on the grounds of disclosure. Can I ask the Secretary of State just how will we make sure that the best experiences of Operation Kenova are built into the next stages of the legislation?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. In a number of respects, the advisory committee representing victims and survivors, the fact there will be a new oversight board, the changes that the bill is making to the provisions relating to disclosure. But she makes such a powerful point when she says that the lack of answers creates a void, and this is a void that the families have had to live with for many, many, many years, and that is why the whole House has an obligation to do everything that we can to create a system that all families can have confidence in so that all cases can be looked at by it.
Jim Allister.
Mr. Speaker, on a day like today, I think it's important to remind ourselves that our security and intelligence forces saved hundreds of lives in the face of murderous terrorism. Terrorists, of course, who kept no records to be pored over years later. Would the Secretary of State agree that Scapatini, first and foremost, was a ruthless IRA murderer? Would he agree that the RUC and the UDR, whatever the renegade actions of a very tiny number of members, some of whom have rightly faced justice for it, that they were organisations of immense integrity, whose service and bravery preserved many lives? And does he agree that the Denton report finally lays to rest the Republican myth that the security forces were implicated in the Dublin and Monaghan bombings?
Well, on the latter point that the honourable gentleman raises, that is indeed what the Kenova report says today. It's one of many reasons why it is so important. I am not going to comment on the alleged agent with the name Steak Knife for the reasons that I gave out in answering the right honourable gentleman's question at the beginning, because this Thompson judgment that we are currently awaiting is really important in respect of neither confirm nor deny. I've already indicated to the House that I join all honourable and right honourable members in paying tribute to the work of the intelligence services and the security forces in trying to keep people safe in the face of murder and mayhem caused by many people during the course of the Troubles, both the Republican movement but also the loyalist gangs that killed a lot of people also.
Adam Jones.
Can I thank the right honourable gentleman from East Belfast for his urgent question, and like him and others across the House, I think about the victims of terrorism who lost their lives and their families today. I want to acknowledge and commend Sir Ian Livingston and Chief Constable Boucher for their work. I think this is a demonstration how important independence is. Now, the reports, Mr. Speaker, for families that Operation Kenova has produced demonstrates the value of independent and effective legacy investigations. So with that in mind, and I acknowledge the Secretary of State's reference to his openness, can I urge him to think about appointments to the new judicial panel of the new Legacy Commission? I believe that they should be made by the Judicial Appointments Commission in Northern Ireland rather than the Secretary of State, because as Operation Kenova, any Secretary of State, I should say, because Operation Kenova demonstrates that independence is key if we're going to effectively address the legacy of the past.
Well, independence is indeed extremely important to building a sense of confidence on the part of families that their cases will be properly looked into. I note the point that my honourable friend makes about the appointment of judicial panel members for the Commission, in particular the inquisitorial proceedings. I suspect that we may return to that in committee.
Carl Lockhart.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State needs to go further. A number of members have pressed him on this point, but he still has not explicitly told this House that given the extensive scrutiny directed at alleged agents within the UK establishment, what demands he has made of the Irish Government to disclose the extent and details of agents operating within the Republican movement, particularly in light of the irrefutable evidence of collusion that enabled the murder of RUC officers, UDR and Protestant civilians, particularly in the border areas, because unlike him, I'm not prepared to accept their say-so when for decades they have covered up, housed and protected terrorists and denied innocent victims truth and justice.
Say to the honourable member, in the light of what she has just said, I hope that she would welcome the commitments that the Irish Government has given. Well, she shakes her head, but she is saying, well, the past and what happened in Ireland or didn't happen in Ireland is a matter for the Irish state to deal with. But I hope she would welcome the commitments that have been given to cooperate to the fullest possible extent in the new legacy commission, which is not the case in relation to the current commission established by the Legacy Act for reasons that she and the whole House will be well aware of, because whatever happened in the past, the most important thing is that we enable families who are still waiting for answers all information that is available now. That is what the Irish Government is committed to.
Speaker, on Kenova, I can only express horror experienced by some of the victims, but I think the wider context of our security services is very important. I worked in the Foreign Office in counter-terrorism on the anti-ISIS campaign. The Secretary of State speaks about strict regulation today. That resonates. He speaks about neither confirm nor deny. I entirely agree with his points. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the ethics
from the contact that I have had with the security services I took this post, the commitment, the dedication, the passion, the ingenuity, determination to today is quite something to behold, and some judgments are complex. There's no doubt about that, but it's also important that we learn from the past and what didn't go right. And I think anyone looking at the final Kenova report today and seeing what it feels about what went on in some cases, recognise the importance of learning from that past, and that is why the legislation which governments have since have been so important, because that legislation recognises the complexity but reached the conclusion you have to have a legal framework that governs it with independent oversight. We now have that. That was not the case in the 1970s and the 1980s.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the press conference this morning, the Chief Constable said an investigation has demonstrated that murders that could and should have been prevented that were allowed to take place. Mr. Speaker, there is always an alternative to murder in Ireland. So would the State agree with me that it's now time for an inquiry actually to identify, to hold to account those who directed terrorism and murder in Ireland?
Well, I would say to the honourable gentleman that we have the last in the Legacy Act, which has the capacity to investigate all cases that are referred to it. And when I came into office, I took the decision that we would retain but reform the Commission as opposed to abolishing it and starting again, as I was urged by in Northern Ireland. I think it's the right decision to take, not least because there are, 100 investigations that are currently taking place. But what we have to ensure is that it is established and reformed in a way that gives all families confidence. And I would say that what we want to achieve is one mechanism for dealing with finding answers to those questions. I've said to the House a number of times before to speak to deal with legacy by a series of public inquiry. We need to establish the Commission on the basis that it can do the job for it.
Samuel Wilson.
Mr. Speaker, the report makes it quite clear IRA brutality and murder in Northern Ireland, including murders within their own Republican community. Does it state that the First Minister can no longer remain ambiguous? First of all, her acknowledgement, and secondly, her apology for what her fellow travellers did to people within their own community and within the wider community in Northern Ireland. And would he also accept that the real state collusion occurred by the successive governments in the Irish Republic who hid terrorists, store arms, train, cross the border, and then refused to extradite them? And instead of giving arrangements for the legacy path, we commit to holding the Irish government to account for its sins of the past.
Well, I can say to the government to account for the commitments it gave in the framework that I announced in September. Of there was always an alternative went on, always. And Northern Ireland eventually got there through the agreement and the peace that has been sealed and sustained since 1990. It is for the individual to decide how to do that. But I say to the honourable gentleman that what we need to focus on now, because it's clearly that can't be undone in the past, is to learn from what we have learnt, and today's report is an extremely important contribution to that, about what's going on in all sorts of ways, but to make sure, as I've said a number of times, that families get those answers for. Kenova did a lot to do that for the families with whom lots and lots of other families who still don't know. That's why we have to have a commission that works for everyone.
Sir Putchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This report covers the activities of one informer from within the higher echelons of the provisional IRA. But does the Secretary of State agree with me that there is a risk that the findings of this report fail to fully recognise the contribution made by informants and agents inside the IRA to stop the killings of countless lives?
Well, I think it's very important that we take a balanced view, that we acknowledge successes and determination, and we abundance of the troubles. But where things happened should not have happened, we need to acknowledge them. Because how can you make progress now and into the future if you don't learn the lessons of the past?
As people realise the Secretary of State, they will be looking to the future as we try and ensure no one rewrites the past. But in trying to do that, with the Secretary agrees the murky world that people like Scappatigny inhabited brought about the consequences of 1984, when both the IRA and Loyalists declared ceasefires, and that now is the time for the leaders of the political movement to say what happened was wrong, shouldn't have happened, and issue an unequivocal apology for the actions of the provisional IRA.
Well, I would simply say to the Honourable, and he raises an important point, there was always an alternative to violence. It was not justified, it was never justified. And when you were killed on all sides in the trouble, the grief, the pain, the suffering, that was. But we also need to recognise that there was a process that led to those ceasefires, to political power sharing, which has resulted in peace and stability in Northern Ireland ever since the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. The most important thing that we should hold on to, as I've said already, learning the lessons of the past, providing answers to those families who remain to find them. And I would just share with you, this is the final question, about 3.5 weeks ago, I went to Bragg Bog, and with the brother and two brothers and sister of he was 19 years of age when he was murdered. The nation suggests that his remains lie in that bog. It is a desolate place. They're searching for his body for a very, very long time. And the Commission for the Location of Victims made such an important job in helping to bring back the remains of people who were murdered in those circumstances, Mr. Speaker. They could be laid with their families present. And I'm sure all members of the House, when the bodies of Columba McVeigh and Robert Nyrock and Seamus Maguire and Joe Linsky are finally recovered, so all of the disappeared can rest where they should rest, with the knowledge of their families, so they can have some peace.
Yeah. Final question, Jim Shannon.
Man's question. Can I thank the Secretary of State very much for his answers, and can I also thank all of the security forces, the RC, for all to save lives. This House, the nation, Northern Ireland, owes them a great debt. all that they've done, and we put that on record. When Viking over, my mind goes back to the 1984 and the case of a young who lived in Portaferry in my constituency of Strangford. His case was part of the file sent to the PPS for North Ireland. Support of state involvement, but no prosecution was ever initiated. They're still alive and mourning the killing of Jimmy. So we take his family access to as much information as legally possible to get them some form of justice. I ask for justice. I'm asking for justice.
Well, the makes his.
I know he's answering.
The honourable gentleman always makes his contribution to matters with real and compassion to find answers for families. As he will be aware, Operation Kenova submitted a number of files to the prosecution service in Northern Ireland. In only one case, the prosecution taking forward, and I referred to that in my the right honourable gentleman's question. In other cases, the PPS there was not a basis. It is frustrating. The independent system is an absolutely essential safeguard for all of us, because they have to make a judgment as to whether the two tests, is there a reasonable prospect of a conviction, is it in interest. But that does not mean that the family that the honourable gentleman has referred to can't still seek to get answers, and that is what the Commission is for. Look, it's taking currently, and doing in the future the new arrangements that I hope the House will agree put in place, because we should leave no stones unturned in trying to give what they've been looking for such a long time, and I wish that to the family that the member refers to.
We'll now from Ms. Chancellor.
Well, I call the Home Secretary to make the mind honourable members that they should not refer to any specific cases currently before the courts, that they should exercise caution with respect to any specific cases that might subsequently come before the courts in order not to prejudice these proceedings.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With permission, I make a statement on the independent inquiry into gangs, the appointment of its channel, a chair and panel, and the inquiry's terms of reference. I know that for me it is long overdue. For years, the victims of awful crimes were ignored. First abused by violators, they then found themselves belittled and even blamed when it was justice they were owed. In January, my predecessor asked Baroness of Blackstock, who's here with us today, to conduct a national audit based sexual exploitation and abuse. With devastating clarity, Baroness Casey revealed the horror that lies behind that term. It is that we do all these crimes, multiple assaults committed by multiple men on multiple occasions, children to beatings and gang rapes, many sexually transmitted infections, some were forced to have abortions, their children taken from them. It was not just these awful crimes that now shame us. There was also a failure by the state in its many forms to fulfill the most basic, protecting the young and vulnerable. Worse still, some in positions of power turned a blind eye to the horror, even covered it up. Shameful national data, in case it was clear that in some local areas where data was available, and I quote, proportionate numbers of men from Asian ethnic backgrounds were amongst the suspects. Like every member of my community who I know, I am horrified by these acts. We must root out this evil once and for all. The sickening act of a minority of evil men, as well as positions of authority who look the other way, must not be allowed to marginalise or demonise entire communities of law-abiding citizens. What is required now, a moment of reckoning, cast fresh light on this darkness. In her order, Baroness Casey called for a national inquiry. In the government accepted that recommendation. And today, I can announce the leadership of the inquiry and a draft of the inquiry's terms of reference. The inquiry will be chaired by Baroness Longfield. As many in this place will know, Baroness Longfield was the Children's Commissioner from 2015 to 2021. She has devoted her life to children's rights, including running a charity supporting and protecting people and working for Prime Ministers of different political parties. In recognition of her, Longfield was elevated to the Lords earlier this year. At that point, she took the Labour whip, which, taking up this appointment, will now resign. Alongside her, I also announce her two fellow panellists. The first, Zoe Billingham, CBE. Zoe is a former inspector at His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and currently serves as chair of Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust. She brings deep expertise in safeguarding and policing, holding forces to account. The second panellist is Eleanor Kelly, CBE. Eleanor is the former Chief Executive of Southwark Council. In 2017, she supported the survivors of the London Bridge terrorist attacks and the victims of the Grenfell Tower fire of the same year. Together, the chair and panel bring deep experience of championing children's rights, knowledge of police and local government, and crucially, a proven track record of holding powerful institutions to account. Each individual was recommended by Baroness Casey, and her recommendation follows recent engagement with victims. The first thing the chair and panel will do, alongside Baroness Casey, is meet with victims later this week. Today, we also published draft terms of reference, which I will place in the Library of the House. Baroness Casey was clear this inquiry must be time limited to ensure that justice is swift for those who have already waited too long. For that reason, it will be completed within 3 years, supported by a £65 million budget. There will be a series of local investigations overseen by a national panel with full statutory powers. Baroness Longfield has confirmed that Oldham will have a local investigation. The panel will determine the other locations in due course, and no area will be able to resist a local investigation. Terms of reference are clear on vital issues. The inquiry is focused specifically on child sexual abuse committed by grooming gangs. It will consider explicitly the background of offenders, including their ethnicity and religion, and whether the authorities failed to properly investigate what happened, a misplaced desire to protect community code. The inquiry will act without fear or favour, identifying individual, institutional and systemic failure, inadequate organisational responses and failures of leadership. It will also work hand in hand with the police, where criminality comes to light, be that perpetrators or those who committed their crimes. The inquiry will pass evidence to law enforcement so they can take forward any further prosecutions and put all of these evil men behind bars. The inquiry must and will place and survivors at the forefront, with a charter setting out how they will participate and how their views, experiences and testimony shape the inquiry's work. As I have said already, the terms are in draft form. The chair will now consult on them with victims and other stakeholders, and they will be confirmed no later than March, when the inquiry in alongside launching this inquiry, Baroness Casey's audit contained a number of other recommendations which the government. The inquiry begins to work and continue righting these wrongs. I can announce today that I commission new from UK research and innovation to rectify the unacceptable gaps in our understanding of perpetrators' backgrounds and motivations, including their ethnicity and religion. My professor wrote to all police forces calling on them to improve the collection of ethnicity data. And while the Secretary does not currently have the power to mandate that this is collected, I will rectify this by legislating at the earliest opportunity. Education is currently investigating gaps in children in need data identified in the audit, which seems to underreport the scale of this crisis. My right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, will soon publish the findings of an urgent review of this data conducted by her department. Across government, the audit identified poor data sharing continues to put children at risk. As a result, we are introducing a legal duty of information sharing between safeguarding partners. We are creating a unique identifier for each child, all data across government, and we are upgrading police technology to ensure data can be shared across agencies. The audit also identified an absurdity in our legal system that saw some child rapists convicted of lesser crimes. As a result, we are now changing the law to make clear that children cannot consent when they have been raped by an adult, and so perpetrators are charged for the hideous crime they have in fact committed. While the law has protected abusers from the consequences of their crimes, it has too often punished victims. Some survivors were convicted for crimes they had been to, continuing their trauma to this day. We are already bill to disregard offences related to prostitution, and the Ministry is now working with the Criminal Cases Review Commission to ensure that they are resourced to review applications from individuals who believe that they were wrongly criminalised. The National Audit identified further weaknesses in relation to taxi licensing. Abusers were applying for licences in areas where controls were lax to circumvent protection placed by local councils to tackle abuse. My right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, will soon be legislating to close this dangerous hole in the regulation of taxis. The audit was clear that justice had been done. Baroness requested a national police investigation was required to bring offenders to justice. Last month, the Crime Agency launched Operation Beacon Paw, reviewing previously closed cases of child sexual exploitation. It flagged more than 1,200 cases for potential investigation, more than 200 of which are high-priority cases of rape. The men who committed these crimes and they got away with it will find they have nowhere to hide. The audit finally called on the government to fund the delivery of its recommendations. I announced today that a further £3.65 million will be committed this year to the policing operation, survivor support and research into group gangs. This work, Madam Deputy Speaker, is essential. Without truth, there can be no justice. Today, I have announced the chair and panel of inquiry will shine a bright light on this dark moment in our history. They will do so alongside the victims of these awful crimes who have waited too long to see justice done. This inquiry is theirs, not ours. So I call on all those present to put aside for a moment and to support this chair and her panel in the pursuit of truth and justice. And I commend the statement to the House.
Home Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let us remember victims are at the heart of this. Young girls, only 10 years old, were groomed and gang-raped by men of mainly Pakistani origin. Girls like Jane, just 12 years old when she was raped by an illegal immigrant. When she found instead of arresting the rapist, arrested Jane. Or Anna, only 15 years old, who repeatedly told social that she was gang raped, but instead of helping her, they allowed her to marry her main abuser in an Islamic ceremony, ended a very social worker who should have protected her. Last week, sentencing remarks were published. Several of these warn the House, some of these are extremely graphic. One perpetrator, Mohammed Karar, raped a 12-year-old girl, and when she tried to fight back, he hit her with a baseball bat and then inserted the handle of her vagina. He also injected her with heroin, crack cocaine. Another man, Arshid Hussain, viciously beat a young girl, stubbed out a cigarette on her chest, tied her up, and she was then repeatedly by numerous different Asian men. The same man, Arshid Hussain, also called a victim who had been raped and abused since the age of just 7 white trash. He said that Asian girls would not do what he was forcing her to do. There was an explicit racial element of crime in his victim because she was white. The identity of the majority of the perpetrators is something that should not be hidden. A 20 by academics at the universities of Southampton and Reading reviewed 400 grooming convictions. They found that 83% of the perpetrators were of Muslim background, mainly specifically of Pakistani heritage. The Casey report and the Telford report made similar observations. The fact is, these crimes were deliberately covered up by those in authority who were more interested in so-called community relations and avoiding being than they were protecting young girls. I spoke to a returning officer who was told by a serving chief superintendent to stop investigating abuse by Pakistani origin taxi drivers in Bradford because the local police did not want to offend Bradford's Muslim community. And I've sent the name of the officer to the police for investigation. A former Labour MP, Simon Danchuk, was even told by the then chair of the Parliamentary Labour Party to start asking questions to avoid antagonising the Muslim community in his town. Yet when the need for a national inquiry into this was raised in January, the President disgracefully smeared those calling for an inquiry as, quotes, far right. What the Prime Minister claimed was far right bandwagon in January had become government policy by June. So will the Home Secretary please apologise on behalf of the Prime Minister for what he said last January? The truth is, this should not have taken several months, and the threat of a vote to agree to this inquiry in the first place, and have taken another 6 months to chair. That is what survivors and their families told me yesterday. One of the most disturbing elements of this scandal is the deliberate cover of these crimes, as I have said. So can the Home Secretary assure the House that those in authority who covered up these crimes will be prosecuted for the offence of misconduct in public office, and will inquire cases to the police for investigation? Can she confirm the inquiry will formally start in March of 2026 and that the final report will be published publicly 3 years later in March 2029? We have not yet seen the terms of reference. Survivors and their families, who I met yesterday, are concerned the scope of this may be too broad. So will the Home Secretary confirm the focus specifically on localised, group-based grooming gangs, and that it will analyse the report on ethnicity and religious background of perpetrators? Local inquiries sitting underneath the national inquiry, can she also specifically confirm that those local inquiries will be completely independent of the bodies they are investigating, particularly independent of local councils, independent of local police forces? They can't be allowed to investigate themselves. Will the Secretary also confirm that parents of survivors and victims will be able to serve on the panel as well? I spoke yesterday to 2 parents of survivors who felt they'd been excluded from the previous panels. Madam Deputy Speaker, survivors and victims, the truth has been hidden for far too long. These crimes were covered up because the authority were more concerned about so-called community relations, but avoiding being called racist, than they were protecting young children. That was moral failure. The truth, at last, out.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Shadow Secretary of State for, let me just say, as he was reading out excerpts from some of the scripts that have been made I, like other members in the House, have read some of those transcripts, and they do make for truly horrifying reading, and they are a reminder, the starkest reminder of all perhaps, in this and beyond, that it is absolutely essential that we all collectively do right by the victims who have had such unimaginable horrors inflicted upon them. And I hope that that is the spirit in which we engage across this House as the inquiry gets up and running and continues its work. I also want to take a moment to elevate, now that we have a chair in place, to elevate this discussion beyond our usual trade-offs of across the dispatch box. The Secretary of State has a critique of the government. I will robustly defend the government of part. We have always been focused on the outcome of justice and truth for victims, less so than itself, but it was the government that asked Baroness Casey to her national order, followed and recommended this national inquiry, and that is what we are doing, and that is what we have supported. But now that we have a chair and a panel, I just think that this is a moment victims who are a diverse cohort of people who will have different views, all feel, regardless of where they stand on this inquiry itself, some degree of anxiety about what will happen next, and will need some reassurance that we can rise above our usual political discourse and unite for the chair and panel as they do this important work. Let me say, for most of his detailed questions, the answer is a straightforward yes. Scope, let me just reassure him, there's no dilution, and it is very clearly focused on exactly the problem that was named by Ms. Casey in a national order. To the extent that the inquiry finds evidence of any potential misconduct in public or other breaches of the law, of course, they are our partners in law enforcement. Having this inquiry is to make sure that actions that result investigations and that people are properly held to account, including by facing the full force of the law. I'm sure once the inquiry, they will have other things to say, particularly even about strengthening the law as well. So I think it's important we let the inquiry do their work, but they are not going to be held back from making any that lead to further investigations and accountability through the legal system. Let me also come to him on timings. March. The draft terms of reference will be confirmed no later than March. Could come a little earlier potentially, but up to three months for the draft terms of reference, and then up to 3 years for the inquiry to conclude than March 29 with the report as well. A table that the chair and the panel members have signed up for local investigations. Of course, it's right, they were investigating themselves. The work of the local investigation under the auspices of the chair and her panel, and they will be making sure that those investigations are held by them to the standard that they will set themselves, and they will also decide which other areas they wish to be included in these local investigations, and I'm sure members will want presentations to them. No area anywhere in England or able to resist having a local investigation under the auspices of this inquiry, which of course has all the statutory powers that you would expect such an inquiry to have. I think, Madam, I've dealt with all of the issues that the Shadow Secretary has raised, but I do look forward to open more constructive between us as the inquiry gets underway.
Champion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, as you know, I've spent 13 years researching this most evening, so I don't know how or where to start, but let me boil it down to a couple of things. One, I still have no idea why those protect children didn't do that, and so I hope the inquiry both finds that out and ensures no way that happens again. Two, I believe the of this is literally every town, every city, every village in the United Kingdom, and so I hope the inquiry and the NSA work is able to cover all of that. But then that brings me to my substantive, which is this is going to cost a lot of money. Every case you find will need an investigation. Equally, local authorities will have to put child protection measures in place. In Rotherham, all of that money has come from the local authority. So can the Home Secretary assure us that our local authorities will have child protection money and our police forces will have the resources they need to get the prosecutions we have to see?
Secretary.
I thank my honourable friend and I pay tribute to her long work exposing many of the issues in her own area that will now be the subject of the national inquiry. She's right, it is shocking and defies comprehension that people whose only job was to look after children failed in their duty to children, and the inquiry will ensure that there is accountability for failures. I hear the point about the inquiry every single area. There's no doubt that child abuse occurs in every part of the country. One of the suggestions that Baroness Casey made was that the inquiry should be time limited because so many of the victims and survivors have waited so long for a proper measure of justice in their cases. And she recognised that there is therefore a necessary trade-off between doing something that time limited and being able to go to every single area. But I'm sure the inquiry, the chair and the panel will actively with members across this house make sure they get to the right areas and can draw the lessons that will then lead to national recommendations. So even if the lessons come from a smaller cohort of areas, all recommendations will apply absolutely everywhere. And the government has already invested billions in child protection measures already in this Parliament, but I recognise the call she has made, and I'm sure that when the recommendation is made, the government will respond on money in due course.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The crimes that we've heard are despicable and sickening. They were first reported in the press more than 20 years ago. The victims have already waited far too long for justice, so we welcome today's announcement. And we welcome other details in the statement, including reforms to ensure children cannot be consented to sexual activity with adults. That was the case is a shame on our nation. And we welcome moves to close loopholes in taxi licensing and the points about data collection too. There are some questions that remain about this process. The government ensure the inquiry remains independent and free from political influence and pressures, regardless of those strong pressures they will face, including from within this House, and that it runs to timetable. In light of the recent resolutions from the previous panel, are ministers still in touch with those women to offer them the chance to rejoin this process now it is gaining some pace? Can the Home Secretary confirm what steps the inquiry will take in the trial of victims and their families? On the matter of the KC&J reviews, will she commit to implementing all previous recommendations from previous reports? Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the national audit highlighted the incomplete data, but it was suggestive of concerns related to the modes of organisation and how those relate to the ethnicity, particularly in where police were recording appropriate data. The Secretary mentioned cohesion in her statement. How will this inquiry avoid stigmatising entire communities and undermining efforts to improve cohesion in this subject and in others adjacent, while thoroughly investigating the matter and ensuring that victims get the justice that they deserve?
I thank the Democrat spokesman for his remarks. Let me reassure him, I think the track records of the chair and the two panel members speak for themselves. These are three women who have a long track record of holding public authorities to account. They've done so in the case of Baroness Longfield, the chair, under different political parties. I think they have shown in their work that they are unafraid of whatever the political might be. It comes to holding either police forces, local authorities or other organisations to account. So I think we should take encouragement from their track record, and I know that Baroness Casey recommended these individuals because of their track record and their deep experience in holding authorities to account, and all of that experience as they conduct the work of the national inquiry now. As for the panel of victims and survivors, they've been written to by the chair and the panel today. The particular panel, in order to help the inquiry going, will now necessarily expand because the inquiry will get up and running. However, the inquiry will itself have a victims' charter that will set out the way. The inquiry will ensure victims and survivors are at the heart of this process. they feel a sense of confidence and trust in the work that the inquiry is doing. On earlier recommendations from this report, we will know commencing our work on all of the recommendations made by Baroness Casey in her national audit, and we continue our work in implementing the recommendations by the ICSA inquiry, and there will be more announcements to come this week and on those, which I won't preempt debate today. And let me just say, on avoiding stigmatising entire communities, I totally hear and understand the point that he's making. It's obviously of concern to many members, including myself, in this House. But let me say to him, in my experience, every community wants these people locked up and wants individuals, these vile rapists, to face the full force of the law. And perhaps those who feel stigmatised by the behaviour of these criminals might even feel strongly than others. But I think it's in everyone's interest that we know the truth, and there is never anything to be afraid of the truth. Once we've established the truth, justice can take place and society can learn lessons in the future.
Jim McMahon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The announcement of the panel terms of reference timelines are welcome. Survivors are waited to engage in the formal process, and it's important for them and for forward that it leaves no stone left unturned. It's not restricted by time, and it follows the evidence wherever it may lead. There are quite a lot of evidence, and that being an important characteristic of the form of abuse that we're talking about here, but can we not lose sight of class? Of course, the perpetrators were large Pakistani men, but the social workers were not, and they had a view of these girls that I think absolutely determined how they were treated. But can I ask the Home Secretary to confirm that the inquiry on that, together with deep dives, will ensure that cross-border offending extended local authority boundaries will be covered and not allowed to fall through the net?
Let me reassure my honourable friend, absolutely on cross-border, that will not be allowed through the net, and that is something the Chair and her panel members have already confirmed. Let me say also to makes a really important point, which I think no one in should lose sight of as well, which was the view that many in society took of the girls that were raped and abused this way. They've seen many parts of society, and some in local authorities, some in policing, as well, as essentially whitewash, that these girls were somehow not children, that they were making decisions as they were in control of their lives, that they were not victims of coercion and serious. And that is why I think this process is so essential, so that that moment of reckoning is required because of this shocking scandal is fair to in every way. So both the criminal justice goes after the vile perpetrators of the crime, but also those in our state institutions that really let these women, these girls down.
Chair of the Home Affairs Committee, Dame Karen Brown.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Home Secretary for her statement and welcome the appointment of the Noble Baroness Field as chair of the panel. She is has a great track record, and I've worked with her myself over many years. I'm sure will do a very thorough job. Also, very victims are being put at the centre of this inquiry. This is about the victims. We cannot forget the terrible suffering that they've had. It must be front and centre of everything that is done by the inquiry. But can I ask the Home Secretary around what will happen if during one of the local inquiries some new or new issue arises? Will it be possible to go back and look at previous inquiries? Will it be possible to even go back and look at those inquiries that are already completed locally, but where perhaps certain issues were not identified that do come along as part of this work?
Well, let me the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee for her comments and her question. Let me assure her, victims and survivors will be at the heart of the inquiry. The draft terms of reference and the fact that there will be a charter that the chair and the panel will create, I think, will give some comfort to victims and survivors as to how they will be able to inform the work of the inquiry and also give them some comfort about the trust and confidence that they can place in the process as well, both of which I think are very much necessary. In terms of evidence, in the end, the inquiry has to go where the evidence takes them. What I am sure of is that they have the freedom to pursue that evidence and then make their recommendations. That could mean new criminal cases are pursued. include. It could mean other action against public authority figures. It could mean that there are gaps in the law that need to be filled as well. But what I am sure is that the draft terms of reference, and they will be consulted on, and if people feel they need to be strengthened, I'm sure they can engage with the chair and the panel to do so. There will be a period of consultation now, but the intention is to make sure that this inquiry does the job that has always been done, which is make sure that the criminal justice system is fit for purpose, but that there is accountability for everyone else who let these girls down.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I strongly welcome the appointment of Anne Longfield as the chair of this new independent inquiry into national grooming gangs. The key is to find facts and follow the evidence wherever it leads, as you said. During the trial of some of the Rochdale papers earlier this year, the prosecution said that the abuse of the girls took place, and I quote, under the noses of social workers and others who should have done far more for them. Does the Home Secretary agree that we need to hold to account anyone who ignored these crimes, and that no council, no police officer, no social worker, no group should ever be exempt from the scrutiny of this new inquiry?
My honourable is absolutely right, and I strongly endorse every point that he has just made. There will be no place to hide